On the 24th of July 1964, there was a riot at a Rolling Stones concert in Blackpool in northwest England that resulted in the band being banned from Blackpool town for 44 years. Today's video is the story of that gig, but it starts in a seemingly disconnected British city some distance away. We're going to go briefly out of England and up into Scotland to Glasgow. And we're going to go back in time 900 years to the founding of something called the Glasgow Fair. The Glasgow Fair started life when Jocelyn, Bishop of Glasgow, obtained permission from King William to establish a yearly fair in the latter part of July, which would take place in the grounds of Glasgow Cathedral. The Glasgow Fair became an annual event taking place year after year, decade after decade, and century after century in the city. By the 1800s, it had become a full-blown fortnight's holiday during which businesses and factories would close and workers and their families would all go on holiday, typically to a nearby seaside location. This was called going down the water. And by the 1960s, going down the water, the fortnightly holiday in the latter half of July, was no longer confined to travelling to the east coast of Scotland. Many Scots would now travel south to beachfront locations and seaside towns in England, and Blackpool in Lancashire was apparently something of a favourite. The English seaside resort back then was still a leading holiday destination. It was, and to a lesser extent still is, a particular favourite with those from the west coast of Scotland. Today, the Glasgow Fair is little more than a fading memory for older Glaswegians, but in 1964 it offered a welcome respite to thousands of workers, with Blackpool top of their list of getaways. This is Ian Stewart, a founding member of the Rolling Stones who was famously removed from the band's official lineup because his look didn't quite fit right with the image of the rest of the band. He remained their pianist and their road manager, however, for the rest of his life. And being both a Scot and being present at that time in Blackpool at that gig, he was able to give a very specific and unique insight into what was really going on between the Glaswegians and the Rolling Stones in Blackpool at that time and in that generation. Ian Stewart was from Fife and clearly had a mixed view of his Glaswegian cousins from that now past generation. July the 24th, 1964 was very nearly the date on my gravestone, Stu said. This city up in Scotland called Glasgow is the roughest city in the world. They'll thump up anybody, these people. They'll take on the US Marines, anyone, put them away without any difficulty at all, because they just live for fighting. They're not cowardly about it, they don't have to do it in gangs. One guy will take on 3 anytime he feels like it. In Germany, they call them poison dwarfs because they're so little and they do so much fucking damage. It's just Glasgow. Glasgow is one big mistake. You go into Glasgow and you see a bus queue of men coming out of a factory. They've all got scars, all been cut, all had their noses pushed in. Horrible place. One of their pet places during the Glasgow Fair is Blackpool. A lot of them have run out of money by the end of the fortnight, but those with money spend all of it on the last night on drink. Anybody who hasn't got any money, they buy drinks for. Once they're outside of Glasgow, they all stick together, and if one guy has a go at a bloke from Glasgow, they all jump him. At this time, there were regular clashes between violent teenage gangs at English seaside resorts, mods and rockers at Brighton being probably the most famous example. Blackpool certainly didn't have it as bad as Brighton, but it also certainly wasn't exempt. When the Rolling Stones arrived in Blackpool that July day for a show at the Empress Ballroom, they hoped it would go better than the previous month's US tour. They'd been mocked on TV and largely ignored by the rest of the media, and Mick Jagger had pithily described it as a disaster. But they had put all that behind them and devoted their energies to promoting their recently issued debut LP and latest single, It's All Over Now, which gave them their first #1 at the start of July. The Rolling Stones were on the rise, but according to guitarist Keith Richards, there was also a certain animosity from British fans at that time towards any British bands that went out courting the American audience. Keith said, "When we got back to England, you were suddenly aware that you had been distanced just by the fact that you'd been to America. It really pissed off the English fans. It happened with the Beatles fans too. You were no longer theirs. There was a sense of resentment, never more so than in Blackpool. There, at the Empress Ballroom, a few weeks after our return, we faced the mob again, though this time a rabble army of Scotch drunks baying for blood. Ian Stewart continues, "So, unsuspecting, we agree to do this dance at the Empress Ballroom, which holds about 6,000 people. We didn't connect the end of the Glasgow Fair and Blackpool. We get into the town, and it's absolutely full of these ravers from Glasgow, and there was some sort of funny agreement whereby police in uniform were not allowed inside the ballroom, some sort of thing between the people that operated the ballroom and the police. The police stayed out of sight backstage, and they were bloody trembling. Doors opened that night at 7 p.m, and it was billed as a special dance, with tickets costing 10 shillings each. The support band were up first, and things did not get off to a particularly good start. Peter Fielding was on stage as a member of the Blackpool band The Executives, who supported the Rolling Stones that night. He said, "The crowd were throwing old pennies at us and shouting, 'We want the Stones, we want the Stones.'" Apparently, feeling fairly provoked by a mostly drunken Scottish audience throwing coins at them and chanting for the headline act, the support band started winding them up by playing the same song twice, back to back. Roy Carr from The Executives started winding everybody up by doing "I've Got My Mojo Working" and then starting the song up again. The coin throwing intensified, as did the chanting, and so the Executives had no choice but to cut their support slot short. The Rolling Stones were due on stage next, and Ian Stewart remembers that the atmosphere was actually already pretty hostile before they got up there. The chants of "We want the Stones, we want the Stones" were possibly not because they actually wanted to see the Stones, but more because they wanted to abuse them. This night there was a bit of an anti-Stones thing going on. I'm not really sure what, and they were all very drunk, and the feeling was getting nastier and nastier, and you could tell. They were really looking for bother. These guys had their girls with them, but they weren't the sweet little big-eyed, long-haired fans from London. The girls carried the knives. The Stones would play a number, and there'd be big cheers and claps and things, and a little bit of screaming, but there's also a lot of derisive cheering as well. No cops, no bouncers. There was the Stones on this stage, and a couple of old retainers in uniform at each corner. As the gig progressed and the drunken crowd continued to goad and antagonise the band, Keith Richards started to respond in kind. These people in Glasgow, they won't normally just walk up to a guy and hit him. They need a spark. You've got to detonate them. I think this kept them off the stage, because they could have come up any time if they felt like it. Some of the guys in the crowd had been booing, and Keith can't stand being booed or anything like that, and he was saying "ah, fuck you" to them, and they could hear him. And so, as the exchange of verbal abuse began to escalate throughout the set, a group of audience members began to barge their way towards the stage. Mick told the BBC, "We could almost see it building up, this tension, all these thugs getting drunker and more violent. There wasn't more than 20 that started it off, and they just pushed their way to the front, pushing girls out of the way, and I saw some girls who were punched and kneed in the stomach. It was really violent and horrible. I've never seen anything like it." As female holidaymakers screeched their appreciation of Jagger's moves, less adoring audience members began spitting, Brian Jones being the prime target. They punched their way to the front, straight to the stage, and started spitting at us, recalled Keith Richards, and in those days I had a temper. Watching from the side of the stage, Ian Stewart knew it was all about to kick off. So they started spitting, and eventually Keith is literally covered. I could see all this going on. I was standing on one side of the stage nearest to Keith, and Keith and these guys started exchanging words. I thought, right, they've got one more number and they'll be off if they're lucky. Keith says, "We start the gig and it's jam-packed, a lot of guys, a lot of them, very pissed, all dressed up in their Sunday best. And suddenly, while I'm playing, this little red-headed fucker spits on me. So I move aside, and he follows me and spits on me again and hits me in the face. So I stand in front of him again, and he spits at me again. 2 or 3 Scots guys got their way to the front right by the stage, and then one of them threw a fork at Stones guitarist Keith Richards, who promptly went forward and kicked his teeth out with his Cuban heel, and it just kicked off from there. Keith singled out a ringleader for retaliation, stamping on his hands and then kicking him in the face. Keith said, with the stage, his head was just about near my shoe, like a penalty shot in football. I just went bang and knocked his fucking head off with the grace of Beckham. He's never walked the same since. And, after that, the riot broke out. As Ian Stewart recalled, "That was it. Good night. The whole hall just erupted. One of their people had been kicked, and that was the spark. I'm surprised they didn't get hold of Keith's leg and pull him off the stage. He wouldn't be here now if they had. The only thing that saved us was that the stage was about 6 feet high, and these people from Glasgow are pretty small. They're rarely much more than 5'6" or 7. Things quickly got out of hand. Bottles and other missiles were thrown, chandeliers smashed, seats ripped up, and as the band retreated from the battle zone, the revenge-hungry pack of drunks vented their venom on the equipment. Eileen Corns was at the show. She said, "I was on holiday in Blackpool. 3/4 of the way through the concert, the venue seemed to get rowdy. Our Scottish friend advised us to take off our shoes and run to the back of the venue, as she feared that there was going to be trouble ahead. I hesitated at first, not really sensing danger, but she screamed at me to move. The Stones ran for it. Charlie's cymbals were being thrown around. Can you imagine a more deadly weapon than a cymbal? Ian remembers we could hear cymbals going through the air, thumps as all the amps got smashed up, and then there was the most glorious fucking crash of all time. There'd been a grand piano on the stage. Keith says they smashed everything, including the piano. We didn't see a piece of equipment that came back any bigger than 3 inches square with wires hanging out. We got out of there by the skin of our teeth. The cops sent for reinforcements and went in with truncheons. Charlie wasn't using his drums, he'd borrowed a drum kit off this guy, and the guy was sitting there crying. His lovely Ludwig kit, we never saw it again, we got 1 cymbal back. They didn't steal them, they just smashed them. Of the amplifiers, there was bits of wood, and I think we got 1 loudspeaker chassis without any cone in it, and that was all. Everything else was totally mangled. The Stones' equipment, from drums to speakers, was left on the stage and destroyed in the ensuing chaos. The band would later claim in a press interview that it was the most sickening night of their lives. The Empress Ballroom was left badly damaged, 2 people were hospitalised, and about 50 treated for minor injuries. Not having been able to get hold of the Stones, they next started fighting amongst themselves. We'd booked a hotel in Preston, says Ian, which is about 20 miles up the road. We drove to the police station, the boys had their own cars at the police station, and cops walked round and round the hotel all night. But outside the hall in Blackpool, the fury continued, the mob also trying to break into the nearby Winter Gardens where the Dave Clark 5 were performing. The police eventually brought the mayhem to an end, but not before damage estimated at £4,000 had been caused. 4 of the miscreants were hauled off to appear in court. And if you look at what £4,000 was worth in 1964 compared to today, you can see just how much damage really was done. The chaos of the gig and the resulting riot was front page news and resulted in the Blackpool Town Council permanently and indefinitely banning the Rolling Stones from ever performing there again. That ban remained in place all throughout the remainder of the 60s, all throughout the 70s, the 80s and the 90s, and was only lifted 44 years later in 2008 by Blackpool Council. And here's an article from 2008. The 1964 riot angered the Town Council fathers so much that they placed an indefinite ban on the Stones ever performing in Blackpool again. But now, nearly half a century on, the council has decided to lift the ban and invite the ageing rockers back to the seaside resort. Peter Callow, the leader of Blackpool Council, explained, "It's time to bury the hatchet and extend the hand of friendship. I want to say, come back Mick, all is forgiven. The ideal scenario would be if they wanted to come back and play a gig, or come and turn on the illuminations. And a spokesman from the band responded, saying, "No comment." And despite how absolutely hilarious it would be to have one of the biggest rock bands on the entire planet playing at the switching on of the Blackpool illuminations, to date, the band have not been back. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, particularly if you were there and if you have any memories to share. A massive thank you, as always, to my Patreon supporters. And if you would like access to bonus content, exclusive videos, extended videos with bonus content, and access to this video along with many others ad-free, go check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. And, as always, I'll see you next time.